Hi there.
Hello, Arne.
Svitlana's Smart Moves. Once again, we have something nice to show you at home. I will start this with my little speech about how all of this is actually working, because in the description in the YouTube video, you can see all the links below the YouTube video, which will lead to the ChessBase news site, and there we have the games. For example, this one here right now, and you will tell me more about this in a short moment, of course, because I am curious what's going on here. You can replay it, you can download it, and this should be taken as a really serious chess lesson with Svitlana Demchenko. So, Svitlana, yeah, what are we having on the menu today?
We will talk about how to improve your pieces, how to place them well, because I know many players encounter the problem of not knowing what to do in the middle game, which plan to pick, and how to really place their pieces if they just came out of the opening. Have you ever had that?
Oh, all the time. Middle game is still, I think middle game is one of the most difficult things for me. I realize this now because of the lessons from you and Elisabeth Peetz. That is, and this is also, yeah, one of those parts where you have to think the most, where you have to make the concrete plans and all of this. And I think I'm a bit scared of it mostly, so I'm playing weird openings to avoid all of this thinking and just have very open and tactical things where you don't have to make plans.
hmm
Not good.
I feel like actually what you've mentioned, what would help you know where to place your pieces in the middle game is actually playing some sort of opening and learning it well, learning the pawn structure. At least that was one of my discoveries, was that when you learn like a specific pawn structure, so I don't know, for example, something like this, even the one that you see on the board, it happens very often in like in some opening that you can learn, and you will constantly see the same pawn structures repeat, and usually the pawn structure determines where you want your pieces. So it's actually, if you learn one specific opening, you will just play it all over again, and you will know exactly where the pieces belong and where they're going, as opposed to always playing something random and always having to think what is the right plan in this new position that I've never seen before.
It's a very, very good point. And you mentioned part of it already in our last two videos, which was the King's Indian. Super, super interesting. And for everybody who likes openings, worth taking a look at. Also in the link below in the playlist, of course, just for you. Good. So
Okay.
let's go for it. What do I have to do here?
So usually, I already gave you a position out of the opening, so we're right
Thank you.
in the middle game. And here, usually the question that I always tell my students to ask themselves, if the position is not too tactical, then the best question is, what is my worst placed piece? And then you try to improve it. So here, what do you think is White's worst placed piece, and how would you improve it?
That is not so easy right now because you might automatically say it is the bishop on a3, but it fulfills its purpose.
Mhm.
So it definitely is not. The knight on c3 is, although it is quite central, it is a bad piece, if you're asking me, because just it just cannot go to b5. It has no impact on d5 or on e4.
Yeah, you
And
still have one more to develop left,
yeah, and
technically two.
then there's of course the rook on f1, which is the last piece. But yeah, I think it is the knight on c3 for me.
Okay, so where do you want the knight?
I believe maybe on g3 with
Okay, so
the
you're thinking about the king side attack already for the future.
something like that. If I would want
Mhm.
to improve it, yes, I would just go to
Okay.
e2. Also
hmm
to open up the c file, maybe.
Right. So I think the knight was not really the problem that I
Damn
saw
it.
in this position, so I would just keep it on c3. And actually, in my eyes, the main battle for now will be on the more or less on the queen side and in the center, because there's the c5 push, which is threatening to push c4 at some point. So I would think it would be worth to focus more on the queen side and in the center rather than bringing the knight to the king side. And the piece that I wanted to improve was this rook right here. How do you think we can do it?
Well, there's very straightforward going to e1, but probably I understand your thinking. So, and this is another move I thought of. It is queen to e2, which will open the last file, which will connect the rooks and which will give the f rook a bit more space.
So the thing about queen e2, positionally, it would be a good move, except I think the tactic of c4
That
makes it not possible. And now you have two bishops hanging, which is here and here. But
Terrible.
rook to e1, your first idea was right, but it's the next maneuver that is harder one to find.
Okay. Yeah, by the way, as you might already have noticed at home, yeah, this is really, I'm not good with that. So I'll try harder. I hope you are also joining in with this training and find some better moves. So if you found rook e1 immediately, well done. Go for it. Keep on. Don't stop.
Yeah, and rook e1 also has the potential idea of like maybe playing e4 at some point. So if black king doesn't castle for a while, we can also think of that. But of course, it was a game between two grandmasters, so they really know what they're doing in the middle game.
Yeah, so then let me try to make a grandmaster move.
Go ahead.
Although it is 2008 and not 2018, I still believe that something like bishop f1 is coming up, maybe.
Bishop f1 is a very grandmaster move. It actually came a bit later in the game. That move did happen. It is a very grandmaster move. I understand what you mean. But so far, it was still about that rook and where it was better placed than on f1.
Oh, is it really like a big maneuver here, going to e2 and then to c2?
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah, that's true. I was really impressed when I saw that, because
really interesting.
you just think about that rook on f1 and you feel like it's not participating, and then you just think, where would it be its ideal spot? And you think it's on c2. You think, okay, I have around 3 moves to spend because the opponent is not developed. And that's how, I guess, he arrived to this decision. I'm not going to say that rook e2 is like the best, absolute best move in the position, but it makes total sense from a strategic point of view and about where this rook is going in general. So now white's main field of action will be the c file, which is what you know in the pawn structure, and it's just what you can see, that the center is going to be the main place. So that was the main maneuver that I wanted to show. The game continued with c takes d4. Then the bishop got taken because it was attacked. E took on d4, and black, since the rooks were on the c file, have now decided that they have to do something else in the center. Otherwise, white would play queen e2 and just control everything here and here, and it looks like a very nice position. And so it ended with it didn't end here, but I want to end this example just at this position, just to see how really grandmasters usually place their pieces. If you can notice, pretty much every single piece is being useful and it's doing something and it creates a threat. And this is exactly how you would want to play in the middle game. You don't want to have one of your pieces out of action completely and the rest be developed. So the game didn't end here. White eventually won, but this rook maneuver was fun. And do you want to move on to the next one, or do you have any questions?
No, absolutely. Makes total sense. And I like it that there is this simple plan of just doubling up the rooks. And, well, you can actually go for it in this middle game, in this part, because there are no real threats and you just push forward to this strategic idea. So I like this example a lot, which you're showing here. We can continue here.
Yeah. So it's not all. This is mostly for positions. This is mostly for positions where there is no like tactics. So we're not talking about some mainline Najdorf where you have to like defend your piece because it's being attacked every move.
That's why
so it's mostly for those calmer openings. And
I have to learn this. Absolutely.
So this next example is the one that I'm sure I've already shown, but it will be a bit different. This is my favorite example to show when I'm talking about the topic of how to win better positions, or something along those lines. But in terms of piece placement, it is also a perfect example. I'm not sure. Does this position ring a bell? Do you remember it?
I remember who played it.
Okay.
But I do remember that's not true. I know we had this position once because I remember that you showed it once because it is Mrs. Judith Polgar against Mr. Viswanathan Anand, and it is an absolute stunning game. Yes, it rings a little bit a bell, but the crucial position is starting. Well, it's starting kind of now, I guess, but yeah, it's a bit later where it gets really rough and tumble and it's beautiful. Yeah, true. So this one is also similar to the topic of how to really place your pieces in the best way. And I think she did it really well here, which is why I want this to be also in this category, in this topic. But what would you play here as white, and where do you think the pieces belong best? So my first intuition is D5 is shining bright like a star. You want to have the knight there, in my opinion. So
yeah.
Furthermore, there is also an option to maybe also double up the rooks on the D file. But I think it is more important to get the knight to D5. But there is the knight on F6, and that's not so much fun. So I thought about bishop G5 to get rid of the knight, but then if it's been taken back by the knight on D7, then it doesn't have that much effect. On the other hand, though, maybe there are a little bit of tactics here and there. I can take on E5, and also the knight on D7 is bound like this too. So yeah, bishop G5 looks weird because it's you normally pin a knight.
Yeah, it looks a bit counterintuitive, something like this, to just threaten giving up a bishop for a knight. But if you had played, this is a Najdorf, I believe. So if you had played the Najdorf before, you would see this idea a lot. So this is a very common thing to do when the D5 square is weak. You mentioned exactly the correct thing, is we want our knight on D5. And because of that, it is actually not a bad idea to trade a dark squared bishop for a knight, because then you have two knights left, which one of them can come there, and the opponent will only have one knight defending the D5 square. So one of your knights will actually stay on D5 forever.
Good. Nice.
Yeah. So this is the right plan. Bishop G5. A black played rook F to C8, taking control of the C file, which they have open. And this next one, this next move is the more of a surprising move when I saw it. But this is exactly on the topic. So what do you think in this position is your worst piece?
What is my worst piece? Well, that's a tough question, I have to say.
It is tough.
So I like my rooks. I will start it the other way around.
Yep.
I will actually try to find the pieces I like. I also like my knight on C3 because it still has the potential to go to D5. So the queen is fulfilling its purpose too right now. Well, the bishop. Yeah, well, the bishop is actually, I mean, I brought it to G5 and it is the worst piece. So I guess how about I'll just exchange it with it.
Okay, so that's what happened on the next turn.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's a good strategic idea. But right now, it's not about the bishop.
So is it the knight on F3? Then?
It is the knight on F3, but where should it go?
Yeah, so let me. Yeah, so now I have to check if this tactic is working. Oh, yeah, maybe it is. So, what about knight taking on e5?
Well, what's going to happen if they just take it back? I don't know, with the knight or
Yeah,
even with the pawn.
I mean, with the pawn, I will take. Yeah, it's just no. It's
You
okay.
wanted to
Okay.
take
Okay. Okay.
here, but they don't have to take back with the knight. Even if they do, you
Yes.
still don't have enough material. But yeah, they will just take back with the queen.
Okay. Fair enough. No. So I won't go there. No. Well, what else is left? We have e1, d2, d4, h4. I heard once in my life getting the knight. Well, okay. Actually, it looks like it is h4 because f5 looks very good now.
F5 does look like a great square. I would agree with that. The thing with going to h4 is that this f5 maneuver can be prevented with just g6.
Okay.
In one move. And it does look weakening, but so far there's nothing we can do about it. So then the knight finds the exact same problem, is that it has nowhere to go.
Still the worst piece and even worse. Okay, good. Well, then it well, where to go to? Well, d4 cannot be it. That's another weird thing. And then pushing, no, it's not working. So it's either e1 or d2. Now, what can we do with e1? We can go to d3, then to b4, and then to d5.
You found it.
Oh my god, no. Oh wow. Oh,
yeah.
What a maneuver.
Yeah, so I really like this move, knight e1, because it really highlights the worst piece question. Wow. It was the only piece that wasn't participating. And this one is really hard to actually play in a game. You know, when you see a move like that, you know that it's either an amateur playing or a grandmaster that made this move. And this is a really nice maneuver because at the end of the day, you think, where would you prefer this knight? And it is exactly on the d5 square. And this is how you think, how you can ever get there. This also has another purpose, is that it defends the pawn on c2. So we're prepared for any time that they play b4.
That was my next question. Okay, yes, perfect. I get it.
That has multiple purposes. And it's better off on here than on f3, where it's doing nothing. Here it's defending that. And we're thinking about this knight d3, knight b4, knight d5 jump in the future. So that's the nice maneuver here. Then black white queen to b7, thinking about attacking the pawn. And the next move I was going to ask, but you already mentioned it. It's bishop f6. Okay. So we're exchanging the right pieces that we want off the board. And yeah, so
now knight d3 or?
Now knight d3 did not happen because there's
now the queen is there and protects the pawn. Yeah, so.
Yeah, okay. But she went knight to d5. And that is for the reason of just trading this knight off and having this square for that other knight eventually. There was an interesting thing that the computer suggests. It is to play the move g3. And I was like surprised. Why would you ever willingly expose your king like that? But you already see the arrow of why the computer actually wants this. I think this would be like really crazy to actually see this in a game, but this knight just has such a nice maneuver. Knight g2, knight e3, and now there's the two squares of f5 and d5.
Yes, that is great, actually.
Yeah, so that's really cool. Moves like this are, it's really shows some really deep positional understanding. And it was one of the other options. She just made this knight trade. Here, what would you recapture with? Should be...
Well, with the rook, obviously.
With the rook, of course, because you want to keep that d5 square for the knight. And so I will not really show the next, like the whole next part of the game. That's like a whole different art. It was a really nice game. Yeah. But eventually I will tell you that the knight did get to d5, finally. Although not the way we expected, but it got there through c2 and through e3. And finally, it did go to d5. And the game actually ended beautifully with an attack on the king, which is the next part of the game. It was a really, really long
And
positional game.
and we looked at it in one of our older episodes, right?
We did. We did. I think it was one of the first episodes.
Yeah.
So it was a while ago. It
Do you
was
have the
over a
Do you have
year.
the playlist down there? I guess we even mentioned you did Polgar maybe, or attacking play, something like that. It was yeah. I remember it now, so it's
Yeah,
worth
I
worth
usually
watching.
show this when I'm talking about how to win better positions because it was exactly how you slowly outplay and
Yeah,
place your pieces on their best squares and always improve them. So I like
nice.
this knight maneuver and figuring out which pieces you wanted to keep, which pieces you want to stay, and where is the ideal, like really ideal place for your pieces. And in this case, it was with the knight on d5. Are you ready for the
Excellent.
next one?
Yes, please. Let's go. I think I'm
Okay.
getting the hang
Okay.
out of it. So
That is good.
now I have to
Um,
really make it happen though.
mhm. Okay, so um, I have this next one, which is also a very quick exercise. We won't see the whole thing because already your position is very good. I'm giving you white in this position, and
Thanks.
you're playing from Spassky's side, so
Oh,
that is usually a good thing. So this is also a maneuvering exercise. What do you think needs to be improved, and what are we targeting?
I want to get my bishop to c4.
Exactly. You found it very quickly and very correctly. The bishop goes to f1
That's
and to
great.
c4.
Yeah.
It's very simple. I think these things are often missed during games because you just don't even you don't even think that your
Yes.
bishop needs any help because it's already standing somewhere,
Of
right?
course, without our exercises before, I wouldn't have gotten it that quickly.
Yeah, so the bishop wants to be on c4 and it cannot be prevented. So anything like b5 just hangs the pawn on c6. So once the bishop comes to c4, even though it took 2 moves to do that, you can already see that it's a much better piece and it is never letting this pawn move, and it's attacking it even better because there's a pin. So now we have a big threat. What do you think is white's big threat?
I guess it's f5.
It is f5, and that's exactly what he played. And he eventually, the position was already winning after the pawn got to e6.
That looks quite
And
nice.
this bishop is actually the reason why this whole combination worked and why we wanted to just maneuver him around, because
Yeah.
every other piece was perfect other than the bishop. And that's how he won this game. And it ended super nicely also with, so the queen took. He resigned here. Spassky's opponent resigned, but it could have been a super nice finish with, for example, Queen d8. And the idea is to play e7 and win the queen back.
So evil.
Which would have been a nice finish, but his opponent didn't really allow it. Usually when my opponents have a really nice mating end, I let it happen on the board because I think it's really nice.
You deserve it.
Yeah, but this did not happen. It would have been a nice combination.
But Mr.
And it was
Jan
just
Hein-Donner said no, I'm not. I know what's gonna happen. Don't worry.
Yeah. So I have one more longer example, which is which would be a game of mine, which I just played last weekend. And
right. Yeah, you got a quite good score in this. So congrats for that, Svitlana. You are back on track after some very difficult tournaments this year so far. And this was, but actually, after all, difficult because there were so many young stars, which is always just, oh God. I'm so scared of youngsters, but this time you had the strongest field and you did the best.
This time it was actually quite the opposite. I felt like I was the young person there because it was all of the experienced players. Most of the best players in Canada were there. A lot of them were. It was a really strong field, and I was. There were a few younger players like me who would get half a point or a point here and there, which Here, this time, I felt like I was the younger one. It wasn't the same as Canadian championships where it was just full of little kids.
But there's of course this problem, which I just said, like the young stars. Of you're still a
Yeah.
young star. You just 18. My goodness, you are also in the elite of the Canadian players. Now, no doubt about it. But I always forget because you act just a bit older. Let's say it like that with your teachings and what you're saying and all of this. So I sometimes forget that you are just 18. Jeez. Anyway, yeah, you said like, okay, enough of those young stars. Now I am the young star. Prepare. Okay.
Yeah. So this was one of my probably one of my favorite games, even though I didn't win it. I drew this game, which you'll see the end of why it was a draw at the end. But it also was one of those games which I really think would be instructive to show in terms of how to really place your pieces out of the opening and how to find the perfect spots for them, where do they go, how to make a plan in the middle game, because I really knew the structure and I knew exactly what to do, and I didn't even spend I was up like half an hour on the clock because I just knew where my pieces belonged and the opponent was a bit confused. So he
Can I
played
ask,
f4 here.
is it a
Yeah,
King's Indian?
it's not a King's Indian,
Oh.
it's a Dutch,
Oh,
but
nice.
super similar to
Yeah.
King's Indian structures, with some slight differences that the f pawn is already gone. So here we'll look at it from black side because I played black. Where would you put your pieces next? What needs
Yeah.
improvement?
Okay, so let's take a look. Now, our bishop is fine. The fianchetto bishop, I mean. But, of course, as often, it's always this bloody c8 bishop, which needs some more attention.
Yeah,
Like
in so many
yeah.
openings. In the French, it's just the nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, although it is not a knight, not a knight, but it is a bishop. So yeah, I guess we just pull it over to g4 maybe, and in best or worst case, we just exchange it with the knight. Maybe.
Okay, so the thing, if you go to g4, is that he's going to play h3, and you will be forced to make that decision right away.
Yeah.
Whether you want to trade it or not. And I personally don't think I want to trade it for that knight on e2, because the knight on e2 is actually white's not greatest piece, but my bishop is fine if it can get developed.
So there aren't that many more options, so it's probably bishop d7 just, or
bishop to d7. What made you not consider other options?
Well, e6 looks so crumbly. And what happens after f5? Takes.
I will take the pawn on c4 gladly.
Oh, there's a c4 pawn hanging.
Yeah.
Oh, so what happens after b3? Oh,
that's how the game went on. So the bishop on e6 is the right move, because it's always good when you're coming out of the opening into the middle game. You always like doing things with the tempo, right? So bishop e6 attacks the pawn, so they cannot do any of the f5 plans. They have to defend it, and this is how the game went on. What were you going to say next?
Well, that there are some tactical moves in the air now, because of course if you take away your knight on f6, then there's this beautiful open line. Also, the square on d4 and on b4 became a bit stronger. I think, well, maybe it was like this.
What do you think white would play if it was their move? What is their threat
right now?
Yeah.
Bishop b2, I guess.
It's not really the thing I would be worried about. There's something that I would.
What would that be? Is it f5?
I think it would be f5, because that kind of makes my bishop come back, blocks my rook, and it doesn't look like the same good coordination of pieces anymore. Okay. So how do you think we could prevent that while also being useful and improving our pieces?
Well, queen d7 is
exactly
taking the job.
Yeah, it's a very simple move. So once you learn like the typical plans for your openings, the moves are actually very simple and they make sense. it's just about yeah, the more you learn the structures and you see examples, the more you'll know where the pieces belong, and you won't even need like to think about it much. So this is how I played, to prevent f5 and to just develop the queen, get the place for the rook. And if you can see, I think most of my pieces are placed really well and they're working really harmoniously together. Then he played queen to d3, persisting on potential f5 threat and also just developing his queen to more active places. What do you think I wanted to do with my pieces next?
Well, it looks very tempting to play the knight to b4 and just protect the queen and get the
Mm-hmm.
knight into an even better position.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, but I have to calculate quickly because, yeah, I guess I understand that the queen is going there, but that might have been planned, and then the queen is going to b1 and stabilizes a bit more there, and then the knight can be kicked away with a3, has to go back.
You're almost like predicting the next part of our game,
Oh,
but it's happening one move later. You're always like
okay.
one move one move ahead. You know, you're just
That's
looking.
what everybody says.
You're calculating too far, and I cannot really keep up with that. So we need the move that is happening now and not a move later.
Gotcha.
But it can also be played. Knight b4 can, of course, be played. I played something different, which was also a piece improvement and making a useful trade.
That's interesting, is it? That is interesting. Useful trade, huh?
Yeah.
Is it now the bishop to g4?
Almost.
Oh, so it's the knight to g4.
It
No, it's the bishop to h3. One
exactly.
of my favorite moves, actually. Why didn't I see
Yeah.
that immediately?
I also like playing it. So basically the bishop here already fulfilled its purpose and it will never be attacking this again because b3 is pretty stable. So you start thinking about which pieces for white are good. And this bishop is usually a really strong piece in the English, for example, which was this opening, because white wants to play some e5 eventually. The bishop will open up and be a really strong piece compared to my bishop there.
Yeah.
So I am playing this, and this will also allow me some, after I'm taking some knight g4 opportunities, and this is why the bishop goes there. It's not weakening anything. And yeah, so I was going to ask about the next move, which you already named with your just futuristic thinking, and it is knight to b4. So this is the way to keep up the initiative, and once again think about which piece isn't working yet and just improving it. And this one has a bit of a trick. So he played queen b1, which was the best move, but the trick is that if he goes anywhere else with the queen, then what I was going to do is take and play queen e6. And if you think about it, how would you defend the pawn?
You really cannot.
You really can't, unless you want to go king to f3, which I don't think you do. It looks very bad.
I actually thought about the knight taking on e4 immediately, but that would be a very bad trade. Yeah, so the queen going there makes total sense.
Right. Nice. So this is what I saw as well, and I thought that it was necessary for white to just play queen to b1, and to me that looked a bit passive, and it blocking the rook, and it just kind of ruins the piece coordination a bit, and it's not where the queen wants to be compared to d3. So yeah, now I'm in the last stage of my piece development. What is my worst placed piece in your opinion?
Guess it's the rook on a8.
Right. Where do you think we want to put it?
Yeah, such a good question, right? There's a couple of options, except b8, but yeah, no, b8 is not so good. Or is it even actually? Because you can push b5, the knight cannot take back. That's quite nice. I like rook b8 at the moment a lot.
Rook b8?
Yeah,
Oh,
although
because
it
you
is
want
a
to play.
weird idea, but there's a nice plan with it. So I just figured out a plan. Also, I'm also thinking of trading on g2, the king takes, and then getting the knight to g4, and then the bishop has to go to some other place, I believe. But
g1, yeah.
anyway, the rook, I guess the most normal move for the rook would be... It's so difficult. I don't know, Svitlana, actually.
It's because you're only looking at the moves with that rook. You think about where do you want it eventually? Where would you want it ideally?
Okay, now I get it. I get it.
Where
Thank
do you want it?
So what we're doing is we're taking the other rook and we're placing it to f7.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect,
This is
thank
what
you.
I played.
That's such
And
a good idea, yeah.
I really like this move. My opponent said he didn't expect it at all
Yeah.
because it's just something that you can not even think about that the rook would want to come here. And the point is just to double them up on the f file. And that is exactly where they belong because there's no other open files right now and it's preparing for anything else that's happening in the center.
Now I have to ask you, because it's an important question. When you made this move, did you at any time, because you knew about this Svitlana game, which we had in the very first example, did you go like, yeah, I remember this pattern. Is this actually an option? Think, calculate. Yeah, that actually looks quite nice and it's working. Or
sometimes I do remember the previous examples that I've like seen before. I think it's more on the subconscious level where I will just think of a certain move and I don't know why I thought about it, but it's because of all of these previous examples that I've seen, but they're just somewhere in my head and I don't remember who played it. I don't remember why they played it, but somehow it brought me back to thinking about this move in this position.
I perfectly understand, and I'm feeling this also much more often. The more I learn, the more I think of moves which I haven't thought before. So it is actually, if you have the feeling you are training and then you forget everything, because this is the feeling I always have. No, your brain is a bit stronger than what you think it is, because it will actually remember so many patterns. If you have those patterns repeating often enough, you will actually go like, what about this move? I think I saw this once or twice even, maybe even more times. Let's think, calculate. It's working. So yeah, okay. That was my little thing about this, because that was very important to understand.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that too. I noticed it as well. The game continued with a3, which is what you predicted. Of course, nobody wants to keep this knight there forever. And it just came back to c6 very calmly. And now the queen is on b1, doing nothing. And it wants to go back to d3 because it has nowhere else to go.
Does nothing.
Yeah. So next, I played a pretty interesting move, which I think if you've never seen the structure before, you're not going to really notice. But what do you think would be the next move, which you're going to think it looks unnatural?
Yeah.
But try to guess it then.
Well,
just make a guess.
From now it comes back to me too, because I believe I know the move, but I could be wrong, of course. So don't nail me on this, but since I was watching your King's Indian games from the 2 lessons earlier, I know that you also played the move e5, and and that made d6 weak, but it fulfilled its purpose on so many levels, because you are opening the f file, which is, of course, there is a big plan with it. Either if they take on e5 or they move to f5, and your knight on c6 can become very, very strong on e5 if they take back. So I think they have to probably play, well, I don't think it's a good idea to actually take back on e5, the more I think of it.
e5 is right. So this is what I played, and I think it was the best plan available here. And it looks like a strategically bad move at first glance, because d6 is getting really weak, and you might think that I'm going to lose this pawn, but that's actually not true, because if they say, let's say they play something like rook d1 to attack my pawn, then my knight will always go to d4.
Oh, okay, that I didn't see.
No matter what. And I have 2 pawns defending it. It's enough forever. Of course, white also has the d5 square for their own knight, which of course I looked at, and it's the drawback of placing my knight on d4 is that the opponent also gets the d5 square. But I was fine with it. I would just keep doubling up. Maybe I would consider taking it to make sure that the knight isn't there, and instead there's a pawn there, and they would have to think really hard which pawn to recapture with. And I think I like this position once again for myself, because my knight is there also forever. So that's the idea of e5, is to potentially, think about the center, not ever have to worry about e5 myself from the white side. And to place the knight on d4. It's one of the common ideas in this pawn structure, and giving up the d5 square for the d4 square. So my opponent had a similar probably thinking process as you've mentioned, is you considered taking it, and then you were like, maybe it's not the best, but you don't really know what else to do. So that is what he played, and that ended up being kind of the mistake that gave me more of the initiative. So now, although I really wanted my knight on d4, of course, and that would mean I have to take back with the pawn. Here, I can't take back with the pawn because c5 is hanging. So instead, I didn't mind my knight being on e5, because it also looks like it's participating in the best way possible. And when I was just looking at this position, I was just enjoying my piece placement so much, because it looks like everything is working well on its good squares, and that I should have some good ideas afterwards. So now I took the bishop, because it was time to get the king there in a dangerous spot, and try to find the next idea, which I missed one of the strategically winning ideas. Maybe you can find it.
Oh. Well, there's only 2 moves which come to mind, which is actually 3 moves, I think.
What are the moves?
Just from my intuition. So it's either the rook going to f8 now to fulfill this maneuver, or putting one of the knights to g4, as I mentioned like a couple of moves earlier, which just looks nice there. So there is something different, you say, huh?
No, that's... Knight to g4 is good. The best line that I think was available was this knight to g4. It's pretty important sometimes in some lines which knight it goes. I was mostly thinking about this knight, honestly, because I wanted this knight to be attacking the e4 pawn. But this knight actually ended up being better for the strategic reason that this next rook comes to f8. And we will now have a lot of threats there. On the f file, because I just have full control of it more than white. And I mean, if they ever take, then it's full control, and the queen is going to even come with a checkmate.
That's brutal, yeah.
So that would not be possible, and I don't really know what else white is going to do, because I'm threatening a lot of things. I'm threatening to take, and bring the queen closer. It's pretty much, the computer would think that it's winning already for black, but it's not that obvious, because there's no material deficit and there's no winning material close anywhere in sight. But it's just the fact that white will never have control of that first open file, and that when my pieces come there, they're actually coming there with the checkmates, and the king is weak. So I actually missed it, and I was more focused on a different target, which now I understand probably wasn't the most powerful one, but I was focused on the e4 pawn target, and I played rook to e8. I thought it was still a good move to win this pawn, which I did end up winning. I didn't really see a defense for it. So this is how the game continued. So I wanted this knight on g4. And then I think my opponent's idea was, maybe that he didn't notice from earlier moves, was that bishop c5 here doesn't work.
Oopsie, didn't even see that.
So that's one of the rook d1 threats, which doesn't work right away. Do you see why?
Yeah, you can just take.
I can just take it. and I can just win the queen back on the next move and
Nice.
also win some material with it. So that would be winning. So that's why after rook d1, I'm not actually forced to move my queen anywhere. And I end up moving it to c6. So I saw this line and I thought that I was winning a pawn, which is true. I am winning a pawn here because just look at the piece placement difference. And that kind of explains why black is just so much better here.
Sure.
And which side is the one with the initiative. Just every single piece that I have is better placed than every single piece that the opponent has. And we have the same type of pieces. So the game continued with just me winning a pawn, but I didn't end up winning the game, I told you, because I messed up my winning advantage in kind of a really nice way.
Oh, that's a strong move.
Of course, right now, this is very strong threat. So white cannot really hope for any tactics. So if you might think, okay, maybe rook d6 is a tactic because if I take, you're going to take back my rook. No, but of course, that is not what I'm going to do. What do we play instead?
Check on e2.
Exactly. Computer even likes rook c4. Okay, that is possible. Okay. I just saw rook e2 and I thought it was over.
Yeah, but then I believe the king goes to h3 and attacks the knight, right? Is that the thing?
That is possible, but am I not just going to be up in exchange? So. No, but it's an exchange.
Is it really?
You don't think?
Oh. Okay,
yeah, I'm up in exchange.
Yeah.
It's good enough to be up in exchange here.
You
at least maybe even something better. But so rook d6 doesn't work, and that's just a full extra pawn. So then the knight blocks me on this diagonal. So now my queen is out of play. Where do I bring it?
E8.
Yeah, exactly. Queen goes to e8, and we keep this threat of rook e2 going.
That's a nice threat.
And queen to d3, my opponent played. And this was the first moment where I started thinking a while, because I felt like the position was winning for black. Like it must have been much better.
It looks good. Yeah, I agree.
Borderline winning. And I'm up a pawn, which is always nice. But my problem here was that I couldn't really find the win, which was bothering me. Every single variation that I saw was like just not quite there. It wasn't mating. It wasn't like winning anything bigger. And I felt like by going for that variation, I would miss out on something better. So for you, which variations do you see? Which ones do you prefer? Which ones do you think are interesting for black?
So I immediately want to exchange the rooks, f1.
Okay.
And after taking back, I want to give a check on e2.
You might actually prefer to do check first instead of taking there, because here you just sure. I just felt like you were giving white a bit more options what to take back with. But okay, so your rook e2 is what I played actually, and this was the second kind of part of the position, because rook e2 looked a bit obvious to play. So next, you want to exchange rooks?
No, now I want to get my bishop to d4, I think.
Right. So that was one of the things I was calculating. And the problem with all of these bishop d4 moves is that he's going to take here. I cannot take back with a queen because there's the rook being attacked. And if I take back with the king, then I have to worry about some annoying queen f3 ideas. And my knight is being attacked. It's going to have to go back or something like that. And maybe this is even bad for me. So bishop d4, I wanted to play it, but it wasn't possible.
Well, then exchange the rooks.
And then do what?
Then maybe go to a2 with the other rook.
To do what?
To either attack a3 or get the queen to e2 and exchange queens.
Okay, well, if you wanted to exchange queens, you could have done it with queen e4.
Just with e4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah.
And I honestly didn't want the pawn on a3. I wanted the mate or something bigger on the king side.
It looks so much as if it has to happen. But
So
how?
exactly. So that was my problem here. I can show you what the winning variation was. Do you want
Oh, there
to
is
see
a
it?
winning variation even.
There
Okay,
is,
show
but
me.
it's not as tactical as I thought. So I was looking at all of these like sacrifices, all of the so what I played in the game was rook f to f2, which I can explain why I played it
Oh,
later.
okay, okay.
Winning variation was going knight f2.
Uh-huh.
So obviously we're making a fork. White has to take back. The rook has to take back. And rook takes, rook takes. So I obviously saw this. And I started thinking, well, I traded a bunch of my pieces on the king side. Of course, I'm not going to have any checkmates. I see knight c7. And well, white is kind of getting away too easy with this. So I saw this position and I wasn't really convinced that this was the best I had.
Yeah.
But according to the engine, it's completely winning, and you're just up a pawn for no reason. His knight is so much worse, even though it is on d5 and on its ideal square. The knight is bad, worse than the bishop. The bishop will go to e5 or to d4, block
Yes.
everything there. The rook on the second rank is actually a really big deal here, and it will forever give that advantage.
Oh.
And you just put the bishop somewhere nice and later win this more from a positional point of view because of the king just being so much weaker for white. So this was kind of the winning variation, which to me wasn't like as clear as the computer thought it was.
No, it's not so clear.
I was looking for some tactics which apparently just didn't really exist there. So actually, the funny part about my rook f2 move is that I was going to go for that same position because eventually I thought there was nothing better. So the reason why I went rook there, of course, it's really stupid. If you want that position, just go with the knight first because it forces it. But I wasn't sure I wanted that position. I was like, I'm going to play rook f2 and I'm going to let him think if he wants to take, if I see like if he wants to take, because here I was also calculating, I was going to think a bit about either knight taking or rook taking.
Yeah.
Because knight takes is transposing to the exact same line, which I thought, okay, I could go for it. But I was also calculating rook f2, which I probably would not have gone for. But it looks quite interesting because it cannot be taken and it's threatening some serious things here. I was calculating some nice lines with rook here, knight here, just like all of these sacrifices. But I was pretty much not convinced by some things like that. I think I just overcalculated it and like overcomplicated it when I could have just take back. But what came next was to my surprise, because I thought the rook had to be taken, or else what do you do? Or else I'm going to go to h2. And guess what white's defense was?
Okay, so
you can just try to guess the move.
Yeah, so what about knight to f4?
No, if that happens, I will take on h2 and play bishop d4. That's my threat.
Bishop d4, oh.
The defense is something I didn't expect.
Is it rook e1?
It's not rook e1 either. Because I will still play the same thing.
Don't know. Can't tell.
The defense is h3, which I was so surprised that it was working.
That sucks.
And the reason why, I'll show you the end. I think it was a really nice end, even though I would not have agreed to a draw from the position that I had, right? It was such a nice, beautiful position with an extra pawn, but this kind of forces me to almost go for a draw. And the reason for that is, of course, I have to play rook here. That's what I came there for. Bishop takes, rook takes, king to g1.
Now the bishop, of course, to d4.
Yeah, so that's what I played. This leads to a draw. I could keep the game going with rook h3, but this is already like risky, and this would be a way to keep the game going. It's still around equal, and I just have to keep going my attack. But bishop d4 is, of course, the main variation to look at, and white kind of has no choice and sacrifices the queen. C takes on d4,
Oh,
then the take on h4. Now, do you see what white's idea was?
Well, yeah, I guess it is to give you a perpetual check with the rooks and the knight, which are just so close to your king.
Ah, well, it's it's actually different from, it's a perpetual on the queen that actually ends up making this a draw. So the threat is knight f6, of course, and also the rook is hanging.
Guys, I'm sorry.
At the same time.
I see that.
So rook and queen are hanging at the same time. So we need to play queen e2. It's the only move that's possible.
Yeah.
And looks great.
Very good, right? Yeah.
But there is knight to f4, only move that defends against the mate. So they have to play it. And then my queen has to stay somewhere on the second rank to defend the rook. And my queen gets a perpetual, like, not a check, but perpetual attack on it. And it cannot leave the second rank. And wherever I go on the second rank, the rook is going to just come there and attack it. So I have to go back and forth. And that's how it ended in a draw. I mean,
oh, how frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, but I was really curious about the previous positions where I I was sure there must be a tactic somewhere, but this h3 was like a really nice save. Wow. And that's why I think it was one of my favorite games from this tournament because yeah, it covers a lot of topics. I think I placed my pieces out of the opening perfectly, and it was going really well until this really, really nice save. And I mean, I don't think I don't get these too often. I feel like it's this queen perpetual is nice.
That is quite nice. What your opponent? What title does he have?
He was an IM.
Yeah. Well, he played very strongly. This defense moves were very, very good. I'm so sorry. I mean, yeah, but what a nice game, as you already said and mentioned this. And what a beautiful lesson. That was fairly interesting. I learned a lot of new patterns, a lot of new ideas, and I can't wait to apply them.
Yeah, so now when you don't know what to do in the middle game, which question are you going to ask yourself?
Which is my weakest piece and how can I make it stronger, better?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's how you should be playing your middle game.
Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Svitlana. We see each other very soon. Bye-bye.